Level 1. The servant's son. You're 11, mucking out the king's mews before dawn, and in 40 years every king this country crowns will carry your blood. You're proud of the job. Your father is the king's master falconer. He flies geofalcons. You fly a kestrel. Then Marcus 41, 10 years a king puts a hunting bolt through the wrong man, Lord Vaughan, and hangs your father for it in the courtyard. 4 days after they cut him down, the steward walks you into the hall. His father was your falconer, your grace. Marcus doesn't look up from his map. I've had 4. Which one? He flicks a silver coin across the flagstones. For the inconvenience. You pick it up. A boy who refuses a king's money is a boy without a roof by nightfall. The bell struck 11 while he was still moving. You'll count to 11 for the rest of your life. You don't know that yet. You don't run. You ask for a place in the kitchens. 40 years from now, this man is going to want one thing. Just one. And you'll be the only person alive who can give it to him. He won't see you coming. Nobody will. That's not an accident. It's the first thing your father ever taught you about hawks. Level 2. The palace squire. 3 years in the kitchens buys you a place holding another man's horse. It doesn't buy you a bed. You're 14. You sleep across a doorway so Sir Halloway can step over you at 3 in the morning. You scour his mail with sand and vinegar until the skin splits along your knuckles, then scour it again because rust is your fault. Everything is your fault. The horse is especially your fault. Every squire learns the same lesson the same week. You are furniture that can be punished. Halloway is drunk by noon most days and needs somebody to say he wasn't. You get good at it. He was in the tack room, my lord. Nothing else men who add things get remembered. Then a spur goes missing. A silver chased riding spur worth 4 days of wine, which is what Halloway sold it for. They ask you. You say nothing. They beat you in the yard for it, 12 strokes with a strap, and you say nothing then either. Because a boy who defends himself is a boy people can describe afterward, and being describable is the one thing you can't afford. 3 days later, the steward, who's known the truth the whole time, moves you inside. High table, wine and water, standing at the wall below the great salt. You don't hear things, he says. You hear everything from that night forward. Nobody in that building has used your given name since you were 11. To all of them you rook your father's name, and nobody ever thinks about that. Your father was teaching you something, back when you thought it was about birds. You don't tame a hawk. You sit with it. You don't sleep and it doesn't sleep, and around the 3rd night, it stops treating you as a threat and starts treating you as weather. You fly it hungry. A fed bird has no reason to come back. He never once said any of that about people. He didn't have to. There's a book about hawks everyone at that table has read. It says which bird belongs to which man. A geofalcon for a king, a peregrine for an earl, a merlin for a lady, a goshawk for a yeoman, a kestrel for a knave. Nobody finds that strange. It's the world, written down. So you stand at the wall and you learn weights. Which lord goes quiet when he's cornered? The kingdom is not run by the man at the head of the table. It's run by whoever decides what reaches him. There's a girl at that table too. 13, kicking her chair leg through 4 courses. You notice her about as much as you'd notice a candlestick. You watch a petition on grain prices die on a staircase. 4 men, 1 conversation under a minute. That winter a village you can name goes hungry. Nobody killed anybody. Nobody signed anything. It never reached the top of a table. That's the night the grieving stops and the studying starts. The coin is sewn into your belt hem by then. They search the squire's quarters twice a year and never find it. They hunt for what a boy would hide, and a boy hides things in a box. Then one evening Marcus walks the length of that hall and stops an arm's length away, close enough to smell wine and wet wool, and tells a page to move that boy. He's blocking the fire. That boy. 4 years, and you're still furniture to him. Standing there, warm down one side and freezing down the other. You understand something. This isn't the wound. This is the door. Nobody guards a door they can't see. 40 years from now, nothing will reach a king in this country unless it comes through you first, and it starts here, with a wine jug at a wall. Level 3. The Royal Knight. You hear about the steel 9 days before anybody dies, and you don't tell a soul. 2 men at the low end of the table, talking about steel that came through a southern port with no buyer's name on it. It's what you make crossbow prods out of. Nobody orders 40 of anything without knowing who for. You're 22. You've stood at that wall 7 years. You know exactly who to tell. You tell nobody. You volunteer for the escort instead. Nobody wants the princess's autumn progress. 4 days in the rain holding a horse. Ignored by a 20-year-old girl and a dozen attendants who outrank you. Knights find reasons. You raise your hand. You'll tell yourself later you weren't certain. You were certain by the 4th day. You waited 5 more. Whitlow Bridge, 3rd afternoon, rain. It isn't a duel. Nothing is ever a duel. 3 men come out of the alders on the blind side while the carriage is slowed at the ford. It's close, it's ugly, finished in under a minute. You get a hand on the second man's collar and hold him under water cold enough to make your fingers stupid, and you're not thinking about your father, or the coin, or any of it. You're thinking about nothing at all, which is how you find out what you are. 2 of them don't get up. The 3rd runs. You take a blade through your left hand, your father's hand, the glove hand, the one that holds the bird. In the carriage afterward, Eleanor is shaking so badly she can't hold the cup, and she watches your mouth moving and asks what you're counting. You say the horses. You're counting to 11. You've counted to 11 since you were a boy in a courtyard every time you're frightened and every time you lie. This is both. Afterward, every man on that road tells a different version. The one that survives is told by whoever the princess thanks first. She thanks you first. Marcus knights you in the courtyard, on the stones. He's warm about it, he likes a soldier. He likes anything that reflects well on the crown and lays the flat of the sword on none. Your shoulder while you hold the coin in your right fist hard enough to mark the palm. It came out of the belt hem that week. Mites don't get searched. He asks your name. Rook, you say. He says it back. Says it's a good hard name for a soldier. A squire buckles gilt spurs onto your heels. Nobody explains what they mean, so here it is. If you're ever executed, they'll take your head off instead of hanging you in a courtyard. That is the entire difference between you and your father. It cost 9 days of silence and 2 men in a river. 7 years he's been hearing that name at his own table, and it has never once caught on anything inside him. Then he claps your shoulder and moves on, because there's always a next thing, and that's the whole secret of the man. He isn't cruel. Cruel would require him to hold still. That night Eleanor sends her own physician for the hand. Then she comes herself. Stands in the doorway of a room you're not important enough to have and asks you a question about yourself, and then, this is the part that ruins everything, waits for the answer. Nobody has done that since your father died. Understand what just happened. The man who hanged your father has opened his family and walked you into it, and every crown this country puts on a head will come out of that mistake. There is now one person inside those walls who looks directly at you. You've spent half your life making certain nobody could, and you can't tell yet whether she's the thing that finishes this or the thing that finishes you. Level 4, the privy counselor. The hand is what does it. It heals crooked. 2 fingers that won't close and a grip that lets go without asking permission, fine for a wine cup, useless for a shield. You find that out in the practice yard at 24, when the shield comes off your arm and skids across the sand. That's the end of you as a sword. Eleanor puts your name forward for a council seat, and Marcus agrees inside a day, because he wants one man in that room who owes everything to him and nothing to any great house. He's right. You do owe him. Just not the way he thinks. Nothing is decided in a council. That's the first thing. Decisions happen in the corridor before the doors open. The meeting exists so 4 men can be seen agreeing in front of the king. Walk in intending to change something and you've already lost. So you learn the only power available to a man with no house behind him. Speak last. Speak once. Never be the man who wanted something. They give you a gown trimmed with 2 rows of ermine because there's a law about how many rows your rank may wear. There's a law about everything. There's a law about who may eat swan. 2 years of that and you're the one they check with in the corridor. Not because they trust you, because you've never asked for anything, and a man who never asks is one nobody has to manage. Meanwhile, you need a room. The hunt rolls for the year your father died are in the Undercroft, and the Undercroft is Pell. Pell is 60 and refuses everyone, because refusal is the only power a clerk gets. He refuses a duke in your first week. He's magnificent at it. You don't bribe him. You don't threaten him. You don't go over his head. You get him promoted. You recommend him warmly, in writing, twice, for a treasury post with a title and a room with a window. He weeps. Takes your ruined hand in both of his and tells you you're the only lord in that building who ever saw him. He isn't wrong. 2 months on, a letter comes up from the treasury. 4 lines, badly spelled, mostly about the window and the light off the river. You keep it. His replacement is 19 and wants very badly to be liked. You've been doing this to people for a decade. You've just never had to stand there while one of them cried about it. The roles are exactly where they should be, because nobody hid anything. There was no conspiracy. There was a story. Everyone repeated it, and nobody read the paper underneath again. The bolt taken out of Lord Vaughan was fletched grey. Grey is the king's fletching. Nobody else in that kingdom is allowed it. And the armorer did what he did every morning, counted the bolts out at dawn, counted them back at dusk, wrote both numbers in a hand you can barely read. 11 out, 10 back. You sit in a cold room with a candle and look at that number a long time, because it's the same number the bell struck while your father was still moving. You'll hear that rhyme every time you open this roll. You never mention it to a living soul. Not once. Ever. 2 things land in the same week. In the margin, in the same unreadable hand. Cobb, huntsman, dismissed. Not executed, dismissed. There's a man alive who counted those bolts back in with his own fingers, 80 miles from this room. And on the Thursday, Marcus looks down the table at the one man who sat there 2 years without asking him for anything and starts thinking about his daughter. Because a son-in-law out of a great house is a creditor, and you're a debt he already owns. Let me say one thing and then I will not bring it up again. A lot of you asked how I make this style of YouTube videos, so I gathered all my tactics for starting a channel like mine in this guide. If you want it, the link's below. Now let's get back to the video. Level 5. The Prince Consort. You're on a stool while 3 men measure you for clothes you'll wear once, and not one of them speaks to you. Nobody asks you anything. In 4 months of preparation, not one person asks you a question about your own wedding. They ask the tailor. The tailor has opinions. They make you a duke on the wedding morning. Everyone calls you the Prince Consort anyway, which isn't a title that exists, and nobody corrects them. A royal marriage is a treaty with music over it. You sign 4 documents that week. One settles the succession. One settles money 9 pages. One settles her household 2, and half of one is about horses. And one you read it twice, standing up, and a corridor concerns the import of Austrian steel through the southern ports. The clerk who hands it to you has no idea why you laugh. Then the thing you didn't account for. Your hand aches in the cold. It has since you were 22, and it will until you die. So that first winter she starts reading to you at night because you can't hold a book steady and you hate being watched trying. She doesn't stop when you fall asleep. You find that out 4 months in, surfacing at some black hour to her voice still going. 3 pages past where you went under. You cannot locate the night it stopped being a strategy. That's what frightens you. Not that it happened. That you've spent 16 years accounting for everything and can't put a date on the most important one. 2 years in, your daughter is born, and there is a feast. There's swan on that table because swans belong to the crown and nobody else may eat one. There's a peacock brought in redressed in its own feathers. There's a sugar castle the length of 2 men that took a confectioner 9 days. Children smash it before midnight. That's the fun part. Marcus is warm and half a jug down and telling stories, and he's good at it. That's what people forget about him. He's genuinely good company, and somebody asks about the old days. So he tells the one about the year he lost a good falconer, the man who slipped the birds early, spooked the horses, got poor Vaughan killed. He tells it as a comedy. He does the limp. The table laughs. Eleanor laughs. And you laugh. Because you're the new son of that house with your hand on your wife's chair, and a man who doesn't laugh at that table is one somebody looks at twice. Under the cloth, you count to 11. Then again. Then a 3rd time before you can stop it. What you understand at that table is worse than anything he did in that courtyard. He doesn't hate your father. He hasn't thought about him in 18 years except as the opening of a story that goes over well after the 3rd jug. It was never cruelty. It was tidying. Later in the passage he takes you by both shoulders. He's had enough wine to mean it. 7 years I've watched you, he says. You're the only man at that table who's never once asked me for anything. It's true. It's also exactly why he's finished, and he says it as a compliment. Hands on your shoulders, while you stand there holding a coin with his face on it behind his back. You should ride for Cobb in the morning. 80 miles, 4 days, back before anyone counts the horses. You don't go. You send a man instead. A slow route, a false errand about hounds. It cost 2 months, and the only thing nobody could take off you being the one person alive who knows the whole shape of it. You tell yourself it's caution. It isn't caution. It's that there's now something in this house you're not willing to leave unattended for 4 days. That's the crack. That's exactly where this whole thing breaks. You just don't know which side of it you'll be standing on. Level 6. The Lord Protector. You get the keys to the kingdom for the one thing you did out of weakness. Because you sent a man for Cobb instead of riding out, you never leave court. Not one night in 2 years. So when Marcus takes a fever on the northern road and doesn't get his strength back home gray, 40 pounds lighter, unable to sit a full council, there's exactly one man with a claim on the seals. The son-in-law who's never been absent, who's never asked for anything. You are trustworthy. That's the joke nobody in that room will ever hear. Genuinely trustworthy. 20 years. And it's the only reason any of this works. They hand you the seals in the small chamber. Not the signet, the privy seal, and the great seal, the two that open rooms. 6 signatures, no ceremony. By nightfall you can open any locked door in the country. The warrant is in a sealed chancery box you've walked past for 7 years. It takes 1 afternoon. His signature, his seal. 2 words where the cause goes. For negligence. Then Cobb arrives, and the whole thing nearly dies in a cart in the yard. He is 81. He has blind cataracts, both eyes, 6 years gone. He cannot testify to anything he claims to have seen. 2 years of work, sitting in a cart, feeling for the side rail. Then he asks you to read him the tally. Cobb never watched the bolts. The job, 30 years of it, was counting them back in by hand at dusk, by knock and fletching, because a huntsman who trusts his eyes at dusk loses the king's arrows. He doesn't need eyes. He never used them. You read him the armorer's line and he corrects the number before you finish it. He's been telling anyone who'd listen for 20 years, from an almshouse 80 miles away. Every one of them dismissed it, not because it was unbelievable, because he was a dismissed man and dismissed men complain. So now you have all of it. You take it to your wife. She doesn't believe you. Not because the evidence is thin. It's very good, because believing it means every warm memory she owns was arranged around a hanging nobody told her about. She was 9 that year. Her father gave her a Merlin. She says you've built this backwards out of a grudge. She is not wrong. Then she does the thing you didn't plan for. Again. She goes and checks. She takes a candle down to the Undercroft at 2 a.m. with the clerk who replaced Pell and reads the rolls herself. Then she rides 80 miles without telling you, sits with a blind huntsman 2 days, and asks him things you never thought to ask. Not what he counted. What her father was like that morning. Whether he was frightened. Whether he tried to stop it. She asks as a daughter. You'd been asking as a prosecutor for 20 years. She comes back on the 3rd day, and her first sentence isn't about her father. How long have you known? You could lie. You've lied to her before and you're excellent at it. You tell her the truth. 20 years. And she does the arithmetic out loud, in order, calmly, which is so much worse than shouting. The escort detail, the council seat, the betrothal she believed was her own idea. Every winter night she sat up reading to a man whose hand hurt. You put the coin on the table. It's all you have left from that week. She looks at it and doesn't pick it up. A coin proves nothing, she says, except that you kept it. Then she takes the roll, the warrant and Cobb's word, and stands. And she walks out with all of it. She doesn't say where she's going, or what she means to do with it. For the first time in 20 years, you're not the one holding it. Level 7. The regent. For 9 days you have no idea what's happening inside your own house. 20 years arranging every room you walk into, and it ends with you in a window seat, pretending to read, listening for horses. She doesn't write. Your wife has the only copies of the only evidence, and you don't know which way she rode. You count a lot that week. Marcus finds out before you do. Somebody in the Undercroft talks. Pell's replacement, almost certainly. And Marcus, 661, propped on cushions in a room that smells of vinegar, orders your arrest. Not for the accusation. For ingratitude. You read the charge sheet later. It uses the word serpent, twice. 20 years, and it's the first time he's thought about you for more than a minute. The arrest never happens. While you sat in a window seat, Eleanor was laying the tally roll, the warrant and Cobb's word before the Privy Council and 6 great houses. The ones he'd done this to. Small men used to close large problems, more than anyone had counted. That's the trouble with a habit. It leaves a list. Marcus isn't overthrown. No army moves. He's outvoted. 4 hours in a room with a table, and a man who ruled 30 years stops ruling. Worse than a war would have meant he was worth the trouble. They hold him in his own solar while the council decides what he is, and that's where he finally asks. You're by the door because somebody has to be, and he looks up and does the arithmetic he never bothered with. Then it arrives. Rook, he says. Edmund Rook, he had a limp. You wait. He gave my daughter a Merlin for her 9th birthday. She called it Sparrow. He almost laughs, which is a stupid name for a hawk. Somewhere down the corridor a servant drops something. Nobody moves. He remembers the bird. He remembers the bird's name. He remembers everything about that man except the part where he killed him. You stand in a room you control, in a country you control, waiting for the thing you've walked toward all your life. The bell goes for the hour. You count to 11. Nothing else happens at all. They can't crown her while her father's alive and unsentenced. So they make you regent until the lawyers decide what a deposed king is. Which means you could put him on the stones. No law would stop you. Half the council expects it. One of them, a decent man trying to be kind, offers it in the corridor the way you'd offer somebody a coat. There's a sword in the regalia with the point broken off. They carry it at every crowning and call it the Sword of Mercy, and nobody ever explained what it was for. Standing in that corridor, you understand it perfectly. It exists so a man can hold something and not use it. You order exile instead. A house on the coast, 4 servants, no visitors without the crown's leave. And then you hear yourself say it. Flat, quiet, finished, a man dealing with an item. You know that voice. You've known it since you were 11, in a hall with a map on the table. I've had 4. Which one? The coin's in your pocket the whole time. You'd meant to put it in his hand 20 years you had that pictured. You get as far as reaching for it. Then you don't. Not because you're merciful. Because pressing that coin into his palm would be theater. And theater is the only language that man was ever fluent in. And you'd rather die than be understood by him. That night you go to the courtyard alone. You stand on the stone. 20 years you've come here. As a boy, a squire, a knight, a counselor, a prince. Now as the man who owns the building. It's a stone. It was always just a stone. Whatever you came here to collect was never in the ground. Now you walk back inside and live in a house where everybody got what they wanted. Level 8. The king consort. They crown you half a step behind your wife, and you spend 4 days being congratulated by people who can't quite look at you. They have to pass an act for it. A queen's husband is not a king that isn't how any of it works, and the lawyers say so for 6 weeks. So the council that outvoted her father writes a law making you one. For her lifetime only. King consort. A real chair, a real coronet, and a law with your name in it. The coronation cost 9,000 marks, 4 years of the grain the North didn't have last winter. What the title actually means is the man permitted to be present. You don't mind. You genuinely don't. You spent your whole life standing at walls, and it turns out the wall nearest the throne is still a wall. Nobody finishes a sentence honestly within 20 feet of you. It isn't lying. It's softer and far harder to catch. Everything arrives slightly rounded off. A bad harvest becomes a difficult harvest. You can't tell whether a man is agreeing with you or with the chair. 41 people work in that household whose whole function is to make sure nothing reaches you that you haven't been prepared for. They are extremely good at it. One man's entire office is to attend you in the privy. It's the most fought-over post in the household because it's the only one guaranteeing a private hour with the crown every day of the year. 2 families stopped speaking over it, which is how you learn your daughter has been ill a month from a routine physician's report. 4 weeks late, filed between the granary figures and a note about the roof. Somebody decided the queen shouldn't be worried during the harvest audit. That person wasn't wrong. That person is not punished. That person will do it again and should. That is the system working. You haven't been alone in a room with your wife in 19 days. Neither of you has mentioned it. You spent 20 years building a wall so nothing could reach you sideways again. It works. It keeps out everything. You start walking down to the mews before dawn. You tell yourself it's for the air. There's a boy in there, 9, maybe 10. Weighing hawks, writing numbers on a slate in a hand nobody will ever read. The new falconer's son. He freezes, acts into the perch rail, forgets what he's holding, says your grace 3 times. You leave. And out in the passage you work out that you've walked past that child 200 times in 6 years. You don't know his name. You genuinely don't. That night Eleanor asks the question. She's held it 6 years, which tells you how big it is. If you planned it for 20 years, she says, was there ever a night you weren't planning? So you tell her about the reading, the cold hand, that first winter. The 3 pages past where you went under and how you lay there not moving, because if you moved she'd stop, and you wanted so badly for her not to stop. It's the truest thing you own. The only thing in 30 years you've said to anybody without weighing it first. She believes you. That's the terrible part. She believes you completely. And it still doesn't undo Whitlow Bridge. The 9 days you sat on that manifest. The escort nobody wanted. Neither of you says it, because you've been married 13 years and by now you can leave whole rooms unopened. I'm not asking whether you loved me, she says. I'm asking whether I'd ever have met you. There isn't an answer. Every road with her in it starts with 3 men in the alders and a boy who kept his mouth shut. Next morning you go back down. The boy's there, the scale, the slate, and you don't ask his name. Because you'd be asking so that you could be a man who asks, and you're finally old enough to know the difference, and not yet good enough to do it anyway. Level 9. The Royal Patriarch. 12 years on, and you've become furniture again. Better furniture. They bring the new ones to you now: christenings, betrothals. The boy who'll be king in 30 years held up in front of an old man so somebody can say he was blessed. You have a grandson. He's 2. He has your wife's mouth and, God help him, your father's hands. 3 painters have done you. In all 3 you're looking slightly past the frame, because in all 3 you were thinking about something else. Every crown this country puts on a head from here forward came out of a birdhouse and a silver coin. You're 51 and you sleep about 4 hours a night. The letter arrives on a Thursday with the coastal post. Marcus is dying. Weeks, the physician thinks. He asks to see his daughter. Once. And here's the thing that takes the air out of the room. It comes to you, not to her. To you, because for 18 years this household has routed anything that might distress the queen through her husband first. The same machinery that let your daughter be ill for a month without you knowing. You built that wall. It has just handed you the last thing you ever wanted. Nobody would ask a question if this letter never arrived. 2 men in the room watch you read it and assume without judgment that it already hasn't. 40 years. 40 years of waiting for one moment where Marcus wants something and you're the door. And it's this one. It was always going to be this one. This is the climax of the whole thing. Understand how small it looks from outside. You put the letter on the table where she'll see it, and you walk out of the room. That's it. That's all of it. No speech, no gesture, no grand moment of mercy. You leave because you don't trust your face to survive her reading it. And if you stay, you'll start explaining. And explaining turns it into a gift. And a gift is a debt you hand somebody. She goes. You don't ask her not to. She doesn't promise to come back. 9 days. You count the bell every hour of all 9. 40 years of counting and you've never been busier. She comes back on the 10th. She doesn't tell you what was said in that house. You don't ask. And that not the crown, not the vote. None of it is the closest thing to love the 2 of you ever managed. 2 people who could take each other apart with 1 sentence, agreeing not to. Marcus dies in the spring. You feel nothing you can name. You go to the burial because she's going. The coin stays in the drawer. Then some morning in the summer you walk down to the mews before dawn out of habit. There's a boy in there. 9, maybe 10. On the scale, on the slate, writing in a hand nobody will ever read. Different boy. The one from before is grown and gone to the kennels, and you never did learn what he was called. This time you ask first. What's your name? Tam, he says. Then, after a second, because somebody taught him. Your Grace. There's a kestrel on his fist. Of course there is. Tam. You'll remember it. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. Then you take the coin out of your pocket and give it to him. No story, no ceremony. A coin warm from a pocket into the hand of a boy with no idea whose face is stamped on it. He'll spend it inside a week on something stupid. Good. You walk back across the courtyard in the gray light, over the stone, an old man in a building that belongs to him. The bell goes for the hour. You count. 11. You always will. If this story stayed with you, like and subscribe for more.